program is supported by SMC Global Power.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are the headlines.
Damen und Herren.
Austrians are gathering in the capital Vienna to protest after Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg announced that a nationwide lockdown would begin today for those not vaccinated against COVID-19.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte filed to contest the Senate elections next year, seeking a way to stay in politics while facing an international probe into his deadly drug war.
Schools are closed for a week in New Delhi as winter pollution levels remain dangerously high.
And South Korea's Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and Korean Foundation for International Cultural Exchange hold the 2021 World K-pop Concert.
First to Europe, Austrians are gathering in the capital Vienna to protest after Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg announced that a nationwide lockdown would begin today for those not vaccinated against COVID-19 or recently recovered as the EU member fights a record surge in cases. Take a look.
Damen und Herren, die Corona-Situation in Österreich ist ernst. Wir setzen diesen Schritt nicht leichten Herzens. Aber leider ist er notwendig.
The lockdown means people over 12 who are neither vaccinated nor recently recovered will not be allowed to leave the house except for reasons such as buying essential supplies, exercise, or seeking medical care. The lockdowns across the Alpine country are to be enforced with random spot checks for the next 10 days. Also from Monday, Vienna is becoming the first region in the EU to offer jabs to children from the age of 5 to 11 at a vaccination center in the capital. Appointments were booked for more than 5,000 children when registration opened on Saturday. The European Medicines Agency has not yet issued an authorization for any of the vaccines to be used for this age group, though member states have the right to do so in a public health emergency. Last week, the government had already said that only those vaccinated against or recovered from the virus would be allowed into restaurants, hotels, and cultural venues.
Germany is preparing to return to working from home under draft legislation on Sunday as the country tries to tackle an unprecedented wave of coronavirus cases. The reintroduction of the rule, which was lifted at the beginning of July, comes as Germany faces a growing fourth wave of the virus. At 289 cases per 100,000 people, the recorded incidence of the coronavirus reached a new high in Europe's most populous country, according to the Robert Koch Institute Health Agency. Under the draft plan, employers in Germany would be forced to offer the option to work from home in the absence of a compelling business reason to come to the office. Anyone going into work would also be asked to show they were protected against the virus or had tested negative. The German government is also working up plans to limit access to certain events to those who have both been vaccinated or recovered from a coronavirus infection and can present a negative test, according to reports in the German media.
An additional 630 cases of the highly transmissible and dominant Delta variant of the coronavirus have been recorded here nationwide, according to a health official today. Here is DOH's Yusek Maria Rosario Vergere.
89.38% have assigned lineages. The latest run comprised of 666 samples collected in March, September, October, and November. Of this, one case was positive for the Alpha variant, and 94.59% or 630 were positive for the Delta variant. There were no samples positive for the Beta variant not detected in the latest run. The variant of concern cases only accounted for 24.8% of the samples collected in the month of February. In March, however, variant of concern cases comprised 82.2% of the total samples. This increase has been consistent for the succeeding months. At present, for samples collected in October, variant of concern cases now comprise about 99.3%, and all 5 samples with collection dates in November tested positive for the Delta variant. More samples collected in November are needed to determine proportion of lineages for samples collected for the aforementioned month. In addition, similar to the other variants of concern, since the detection of the first local Delta variant case collected in April, an increase in the proportion of Delta variant cases were seen for the succeeding months.
Vergeire noted that all regions and all cities and municipalities in the National Capital Region either have Alpha or Beta variants detected. The Delta variant, initially detected from returning overseas Filipinos, is now detected in all 17 regions and all NCR cities and its lone municipality. Meantime, the P.3 variant, which was initially observed in only one person, is now detected in all regions.
Staying in the Philippines, the National Capital Region's COVID-19 classification may likely be de-escalated to Alert Level 1 by December if it can sustain its low-risk classification for a month and vaccinate 70% of its vulnerable population, according to a health official. In an online media forum, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire said the region remains under low-risk classification with its average daily cases on a plateau in the recent week. Watch this.
So again, let me reiterate, it is not impossible for the National Capital Region to be de-escalated to Alert Level 1 by December. Pero kailangan masustain natin kung ano man yung gains na meron tayo ngayon, like having this low risk for at least 2 incubation periods or 1 month, and they have to be able to reach the 70% for all this vulnerable population. And kailangan din yung safety seal ay magkaroon ng mga establishments. So itong threshold na to pinag-uusapan pa, Rafi, ngayong Webes siguro madidesisyonan na para maidagdag natin dun sa mga additional requirements natin for Alert Level 1.
India on Monday opened to foreign tourists from countries with reciprocal agreements after a 20-month ban because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tour operations or operators said, however, that demand was extremely sluggish due to high ticket prices and remaining restrictions on travelers from Britain, China, and elsewhere. The country, famous for the Taj Mahal, desert places, and tiger reserves, barred all foreign tourists in March 2020 as the pandemic intensified. But after a devastating spike in COVID-19 cases earlier this year, the number of known infections has fallen sharply, and the government, under pressure from an industry that is an important pillar of the economy, last month announced a loosening. Tourist visas were issued for fully vaccinated foreigners from countries with reciprocal arrangements arriving on charter flights from October 15. This was widened to include other flights on Monday. Visitors from the approved countries can acquire a tourist visa online and need only monitor their health for 14 days after arrival. But those from Britain, the European Union, China, Brazil, South Africa, and elsewhere are subject to additional measures, including COVID tests on arrival. The first 500,000 visas were also free. Israel gave a green light Sunday to start vaccinating children aged between 5 and 11 against COVID-19 using Pfizer-BioNTech jabs, following the example of the United States. Israel was one of the first countries to launch a vaccination campaign last year using the jabs thanks to a deal with Pfizer that gave it access to millions of doses in exchange for data on the vaccine's efficacy. The vaccination campaign allowed the health authorities to fully vaccinate 5.7 million of the country's 9 million population. The authorities had already begun vaccinating minors aged 12 to 17, but decided to lower the age threshold in the wake of the trials by Pfizer and recommendations from a panel of Israeli scientists. The latest announcement came as health authorities reported 220 new infections over the previous day. It marked a plunge from daily cases that topped 10,000 in late August and early September, driven by the Delta variant of the coronavirus. A campaign for a third booster vaccine appeared key to driving down infections.
In other news, British counter-terrorism police were questioning 3 men today after a heroic taxi driver reportedly foiled a plot to bomb a packed Remembrance Day service in Liverpool. An explosion engulfed a cab outside Liverpool's Women's Hospital seconds before Britain fell silent at 11 a.m. local time on Sunday to honor its war dead. A passenger was killed, but the driver escaped with light injuries after city authorities and newspapers described how he had locked the man inside after growing suspicious about his intentions. The passenger had wanted to go to the annual Remembrance Day service in the Northwest City's Anglican Cathedral, according to UK media, quoting investigators and friends of the cabbie. But road closures forced the taxi to detour, and they ended up at the nearby hospital where the bomb went off just after the driver had escaped, according to the Daily Mail. The taxi went up in a fireball and thick gray smoke billowed afterwards as police rushed to cordon off the hospital, and non-urgent patients were told to divert to other city clinics. Liverpool Mayor Joan Anderson said the taxi driver, in his heroic efforts, has managed to divert what could have been an absolutely awful disaster at the hospital. After the incident, armed police from England's Northwest Counter-Terrorism Command arrested 3 men aged 29, 26, and 21 in a house in Liverpool's Kensington district. Sections of the street remain cordoned off with a heavy police presence at the scene early Monday. The MI5 intelligence service is also assisting in this investigation, according to the Guardian newspaper and BBC.
Secretary Harry Roque described his journey as Malacanang spokesperson as mission accomplished a few hours before he went to the Commission on Elections on Monday to file his certificate of candidacy for senator in the May 2022 elections. Take a look.
Okay, so sasagutin ko na po ang inyong katanungan. Ito na po ang huling araw na makakasama niyo ako bilang inyong presidential spokes, IATF spokes at spokes ng bayan. Kung inyong matatandaan, bumalik naman po ako bilang spokes sa gitna ng pandemya noong 1 taon para magbigay linaw sa panahon ng kalituhan. Masaya akong mission accomplished na po tayo, ha? Iiwan ko ang trabaho ko na mas mabuti kumpara sa ating nadatnan. Nasa 100% na po ang vaccination coverage ng Metro Manila. Mahigit 20% na ang NCR. Ang epicentro ng COVID-19 ay fully vaccinated na. Nasa mahigit 40% na po ang fully vaccinated sa buong Pilipinas. Malapit na marating ang population protection. Ang healthcare utilization rate po natin, base sa ating piniresenta kanina, ay nasa below 40% na lamang. Nagawa po natin ang ingat buhay. Babalik po tayo sa larangan ng politika, babalik po sana tayo sa Kongreso ng Pilipinas, doon po sa Kamara ng Senado. Nagpaalam na po ako kay Presidente Rodrigo Roa Duterte at kay Mayor Inday Sara Duterte para sa panibagong hamon na aking haharapin mula sa inyong pagiging spokes ay nais ko pong maging action man sa Senado. Bago tayo magtapos, magpapasalamat lang po ako sa lahat ng aking nakasama rito po sa Office of the Presidential Spokesperson.
He said his move was also the fulfillment of his promise to Sarah that he would run for senator if the presidential daughter will seek a national post. On Saturday, Sarah filed for COC or her COC to run for vice president to heed the people's clamor to serve the country.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte filed to contest the Senate elections next year. The president, who is constitutionally barred from seeking a second 6-year term, filed his candidacy at the COMELEC or Commission on Elections office minutes before a deadline to join the race. A lawyer submitted the paperwork on behalf of the president, according to documents seen by AFP, quelling speculation he would run for vice president, the same post his daughter Sarah is contesting. The president, 76 years old, had previously said he would run for vice president before changing his mind and announcing plans to retire from politics.
Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte on Sunday said that the offer to run for vice president of the country is an opportunity to meet her supporters halfway and to serve the country. Take a look.
Nagdesisyon na ako na huwag tumakbong pagkapangulo ng Pilipinas. Subalit, wala pa ring humpay ang inyong mga panawagan kahit na pagkalipas ng ika-8 ng Oktubre. I have thousands of supporters who cried last October 8, and I cannot find it in my heart to make them cry again on November 15. After the deadline, the offer to run for vice president became an opportunity to meet you halfway. It's a path that would allow me to heed your call to serve our country and make me a stronger person and public servant in the years that lie ahead. I am here to answer your call. I appeal to all supporters to stay calm. The problems of PDP are their own. Let them resolve the issues within their party. This is all politics, and this will not matter in the years to come.
Sara Duterte on Saturday entered the vice presidential race for the 2022 elections in a surprise move that could boost the chances of presidential hopeful Ferdinand Marcos Jr. winning the country's highest post. Sara Duterte, 43 years old, had been widely expected to seek the presidency in a bid to succeed her father. Her tilt for the country's second highest office was immediately endorsed by the party of Marcos Jr., the son and namesake of the former dictator, to be his running mate in the poll.
A U.S. journalist imprisoned in Myanmar since May has been released and deported from the country days after being sentenced to 11 years in jail. Danny Fenster was being taken to the capital Naypyidaw from Yangon, where he was jailed and would be deported, according to a government source speaking on condition of anonymity. He had been working at a local outlet, Frontier Myanmar, for around a year and was arrested as he headed home to see his family in May. Junta spokesman Zhao Mintun confirmed that he has been released and will be deported. Fenster, who spent 176 days in detention, was sentenced to 11 years in prison last week for encouraging dissent against the military, unlawful association, and breaching immigration law. The 37-year-old was due to go on trial Tuesday on charges of terrorism and sedition, which could have seen him jailed for life. Earlier this month, former U.S. diplomat and hostage negotiator Bill Richardson met Junta Chief Min Aung Hlaing in the capital Naypyidaw, handing the increasingly isolated junta some rare publicity. Richardson said at the time that the U.S. State Department had asked him not to raise Fenster's case during his visit. Fenster is believed to have contracted COVID-19 during his detention, family members said during a conference call with American journalists in August. And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back to the news. Belarus is working to repatriate migrants that have amassed on its border with Poland, according to President Alexander Lukashenko, apparently aiming to defuse the crisis ahead of an EU meeting over new sanctions on the ex-Soviet country.
Желает, мы готовы, как это обычно делали, посадить всех в самолеты, в том числе и Белавия, которые отвезут их обратно домой. Но это люди, надо сказать, очень упертые, по-нашему говоря. Никто возвращаться не хочет. И понятно.
Verlangt von uns, dass wir alle Sanktionen abräumen. Wir werden unsere Antwort heute geben. Wir werden die Sanktionen weiter verschärfen.
Thousands of migrants from the Middle East have been trying to cross from Belarus into EU member Poland in recent months, and tensions soared last week as coordinated efforts to cross were rebuffed by Polish border guards. The EU accuses Belarus of sending the migrants to the border as retribution for earlier sanctions. Belarus has faced waves of EU sanctions in response to a crackdown on the opposition after last year's presidential elections and Lukashenko's decision to ground a Ryanair flight earlier this year over Belarus to detain an activist. Lukashenko denies accusations that he has organized the migrants on the border, saying the situation was proving expensive for his country.
Meanwhile, the UN Climate Change Summit host Boris Johnson hailed a last-ditch agreement to tackle global warming, but said he was disappointed it did not go further on tackling the use of high-polluting coal. Take a look.
Of course, my delight at this progress is tinged with disappointment. Those for whom climate change is already a matter of life and death, who can only stand by as their islands are submerged, their farmland turned to desert, their homes battered by storms, they demanded a high level of ambition for this summit. And while many of us were willing to go there, that wasn't true of everybody. And sadly, that's the nature of diplomacy.
This is a fragile win, and we have kept 1.5 alive. That was our overarching objective when we set off on this journey 2 years ago, taking on the role of the COP presidency designate. But I would still say that the pulse of 1.5 is weak. And that's why, whilst we have reached, I do believe, a historic agreement, what this will be judged on is not just the fact that countries have signed up, but it will be judged on whether they meet and deliver on the commitments. And I'm disappointed, as I've said, in terms of where we ended up. But nevertheless, we have got a historic agreement over the line.
Nearly 200 countries on Saturday pledged to speed up the fight against rising temperatures after 2 weeks of non-stop negotiations. British Prime Minister Johnson called it the 11th hour deal, truly historic, and said it signaled the beginning of the end for coal power. Recognizing coal and oil by name in the text was a painful process, with India and China managing at the last moment to further soften the wording to phase down instead of phase out. Beijing's shift came after it announced on Wednesday a surprise deal with the U.S., the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases after China.
Two strong earthquakes struck southern Iran within 90 seconds Sunday, killing at least one person and sparking scenes of panic, according to official sources. The 6.4 and 6.3 magnitude earthquakes hit a depth of 15 kilometers in Hormozgan province, the Iranian Seismological Center said. A 22-year-old man was killed by a falling electricity pole, according to Iranian Red Crescent chief Mehdi Valipour in a state television interview. He said several teams have been deployed to assess the damage. The public broadcaster aired live footage from the area showing trucks stopped on the road, having been shaken by the tremor. In a video broadcast on state television purportedly of an aftershock, a man is heard saying, "Look what the quake did to the mountains. Another earthquake, it's shaking the trucks and flattening the mountains." The United States Geological Survey measured the tremors at magnitudes of 6 and 6.3. Situated on the edge of several tectonic plates and crossing various fault lines, Iran is an area of strong seismic activity.
Meanwhile, Belgium ordered its poultry into lockdown from today after detecting a case of bird flu in a wild duck, extending avian quarantine measures already in place in neighboring countries. Authorities are attempting to prevent farm birds coming into contact with wild migratory ones to prevent the H5N1 virus from spreading. The second wild duck was found in Schild, a town on the eastern outskirts of Antwerp, Belgium's second biggest urban agglomeration. Neighboring France and the Netherlands have imposed similar poultry lockdowns over the past 3 weeks following outbreaks on their territories. Belgium's restrictions require poultry breeders and hobbyists to keep their birds locked away and to ensure they do not drink from water accessible to wild birds. The public was also urged to notify authorities of any dead birds found. The National Food Safety Agency said that the virus currently being transmitted is not dangerous to humans. It stressed that poultry, meat, and eggs can continue to be bought in Belgium. The European Center for Disease Prevention and Control says that H5N1, quote, has shown to be able to transmit to humans, but that such infections from birds were rare.
Schools are closed for a week in New Delhi as winter pollution levels remain dangerously high. It's really difficult to breathe in this air, says one resident in the Indian capital.
I mean, the air is very hazardous, right? And it's really difficult to breathe in this air. See, point is, it's not this kind of solution. I mean, you can't lock down the economy on a regular basis. Prior to this, there was a lockdown because of COVID itself. Right now, they are closing the schools. Policies needs to be changed.
Yes, it has, because my daughter, she's quite young. She's an infant. She's almost 2. So she recently was checked for, some cough and fever. So it was found that because of the air pollutants, she was not able to, be perfectly healthy. And then we confined her for a few days. And now the situation is much better.
Delhi is ranked one of the world's most polluted cities, with a hazardous melange of factory and vehicle emissions and smoke from agricultural fires settling in the skies over its 20 million people each winter. On Saturday, the Supreme Court suggested imposing a lockdown on Delhi to combat the air quality crisis. The Central Pollution Control Board on Friday advised authorities to prepare for implementation of measures under emergency category. It added the poor air quality would likely run until at least November 18 due to low winds with calm conditions during the night. On Saturday, levels of PM 2.5 particles, the smallest and most harmful, which can enter the bloodstream, topped 300 on the air quality index. That is 20 times the maximum daily limit recommended by the World Health Organization. Hospitals were reporting a sharp rise in patients complaining of breathing difficulties, the Times of India reported.
The death toll from a lethal crowd surge at the rap concert in Texas has risen to 10, according to a lawyer for the victims, after a 9-year-old boy trampled during the event died of his injuries. Scores were injured attending a performance by hip-hop artist Travis Scott at the Astroworld Festival on November 5 in Houston, when concert-goers found themselves crushed against barriers, unable to move or breathe as the mass pressed toward the stage. Some fell and others stumbled on top of them, crushing the bodies beneath, with the density of the crowd closer to the stage, making it hard to pick them up and evacuate them, according to attendees. Among them was 9-year-old Ezra Blount, who sustained severe injuries and was placed in a medically induced coma as doctors fought for his life. Ben Crump, a prominent U.S. attorney representing the victims of the tragedy, issued a statement late Sunday saying that Blount had succumbed to his injuries. At least 60 lawsuits have been announced, singling out Scott and fellow singer Drake, who took to the stage in the final 15 minutes of the concert, well after authorities had declared an emergency.
The death toll from Sudan's latest anti-coup protests at the weekend has risen to 8, according to medics, bringing the total number killed since last month's military takeover to 23. 3 teenagers were among those who lost their lives during the latest mass protest on Saturday, which were met with the deadliest crackdown since the October 25 coup. The Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors, an independent union of medics, named all 8 protesters killed, including a 13-year-old girl who it said had suffered a shot to the head outside her home. Sudan's top general, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, on October 25 declared a state of emergency, ousted the government, and detained the civilian leadership. The military takeover sparked a chorus of international condemnation, including punitive aid cuts, with world powers demanding a swift return to civilian rule. Demonstrators have rallied since then, despite internet outages and disruptions of communication lines, which forced activists to disseminate calls for protest via graffiti and SMS messages.
In other news, Japan's former Princess Mako Komuro arrived in the U.S. on Sunday with her husband, swapping ancient imperial rights for the bright lights of New York after leaving the royal family. The pair tied the knot in Tokyo last month in muted fashion, following years of tabloid gossip and online sniping over their union that Komuro said caused her sadness and pain. A move to the U.S. had long been rumored. The two 30-year-olds finally boarded a commercial flight Sunday from Tokyo to New York, where Kei Komuro attended law school and now works. Mako, the niece of Emperor Naruhito, lost her royal title when she married a commoner under post-war succession laws that only allow male members of the imperial family to ascend to the throne. After announcing their engagement in 2017, the Komoros were confronted with a barrage of reports alleging that Kei's family had run into financial difficulties. Japan's royals are held to exacting standards, and the Imperial Household Agency said Mako developed complex post-traumatic stress disorder because of the media attention. The controversy surrounding the pair and their U.S. move has drawn inevitable comparisons to another royal couple, Britain's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Japanese media said the Komoros, who met at university in Tokyo, have already secured a place to live in New York, though it wasn't clear where in the city they had chosen to set up their new life.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Hi, I'm Alex Calleja, isang podcaster, YouTuber, writer, director, at isang stand-up comedian for more than 12 years. Kaya naman, heto na ang Funniest Nakawall Videos! Ang natatanging show na bubusugin ang buong sambayanan sa katatawanan! Ito ang bagong tambayan ng buong pamilya at barkada. Mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes nyo kami makakasama tuwing 4:30 p.m. Dito lang sa Net 25. Dito, mapapanood natin ang best comedy videos na hinanap pa namin sa kasuluk-sulukan ng internet. So ano pang hinihintay nyo? Join na sa pinakabago at pinakamasayang afternoon habit ng tawanan at kulitan, ang Funniest Nakawall Videos!
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. Japan's economy shrank far more than expected in the 3 months to September as a surge in virus cases hit spending and supply chain issues hampered business, data showed Monday. Now, the world's third largest economy shrank 0.8% quarter on quarter, much worse than the 0.2% economists had forecast. The contraction was driven in part by a 1.2% dip in household consumption that tracked the imposition of a virus state of emergency over the summer when Japan saw its worst ever COVID surge. Also weighing heavily was a drop in non-residential investment, which plunged 3.8% on a chip shortage and supply chain issues that weighed on factory output. Virus cases surged in Japan over the summer after a slow start to the country's vaccination campaign, and the government imposed a virus state of emergency that limited restaurant and bar opening hours and alcohol sales. Analysts said that the slowdown was likely short-lived as Japan's vaccination program has picked up speed, with the government lifting virus restrictions in October. Takashi Miwa, economist at Nomura Securities, said for the fourth quarter, if the virus cases are kept low, consumption will probably bounce back strongly.
In other business news, energy giant Shell today announced plans to switch headquarters from the Netherlands to the UK and drop Royal Dutch from its name in a major shakeup that angered the Dutch government. Take a look. The plan hailed by UK Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng as a clear vote of confidence in the British economy post-Brexit will see Shell switch its tax residents and top executives to Britain. The move deprives the Netherlands of its biggest company, which has for more than 130 years been a symbol of Dutch entrepreneurial spirit and is headquartered in The Hague. Dutch Economic Affairs Minister Stef Blok said on Twitter that they are unpleasantly surprised by this and the cabinet deeply regrets this intention. He said they're in talks with Shell about the implications of this move for jobs, critical investment decisions, and sustainability. Shell, in a statement, said the changes were designed to strengthen the company's competitiveness and accelerate both shareholder distributions and the delivery of its strategy to become a net zero emissions business. It insisted that the simplification will have no impact on a Dutch court ruling that the company slashes greenhouse gas emissions. The legal decision this year was a landmark victory for climate activists, while Monday's announcement comes after activist investor Third Point demanded Shell be broken up, bolster low-carbon investment, and return more cash to shareholders.
A new Chinese stock exchange focused on SMEs began trading in Beijing on Monday, boosting support for smaller-scale firms as economic growth slows and Beijing cracks down on domestic tech giants. Take a look.
我也是作为一个中小企业主，那么感觉做这个北交所的开业成立一定会对全中国的中小微企业起到很大的促进作用，非常好。一个企业如果说没有这个资本、没有证券这方面的助力的话，那可以说一直就叫中小企业，一直玩不大。想做大的话，一定要借助这个金融层面上的一些支持。
正好从这儿过，因为我们在金融街上班，经常看到这个北京市证券交易所这个大牌子。完了，今天终于开业了，真的这个让我们老百姓觉得以后能得到更多的这个交易信息，得到那个股市更多的资讯，那么以便于我们以后更好的这个对金融市场的一些了解。
The new Beijing Stock Exchange is focused on SMEs. It's expected to complement the two main bourses in Shanghai and Shenzhen. Chinese media reported Monday that a number of new stocks on the exchange rose by more than 30%. Stocks will not be allowed to rise or fall more than 30% in a single trading day on the exchange, but earlier reports had said there would be no cap for the first day of listing. On Monday, 10 newly listed companies triggered temporary suspensions when their shares surged to more than 60%, according to state media. It comes as authorities move to develop the country's capital markets amid slowing economic growth and as Beijing clamps down on tech giants in a bid to stem the sector's aggressive growth, alleged data misuse, and monopolistic practices.
And in NBA action, Trae Young finished with 42 points and 10 assists as the Atlanta Hawks snapped a 6-game losing skid by routing the reigning NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks 120-100 on Sunday. Young shot 16 of 26 from the floor and made a career-high 8 3-pointers in his second consecutive game with 30-plus points. John Collins scored 16 of his 19 points in the second half, and Clint Capella added 12 points and 13 rebounds for the Hawks, who improved to 4-1 at home this season. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who returned from missing Friday's contest with a sprained ankle, scored a team-high 26 points and dished out 6 assists for the visiting Bucks, who lost their second straight. Drew Holiday added 19 points and Grayson Allen scored 18 in the loss.
Finally, in our news, South Korea's Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and Korean Foundation for International Cultural Exchange hold the 2021 World K-pop Concert or K-Culture Festival. Now, some 3,000 fans filled the concert hall at Kintex in Goyang, and almost 150,000 viewers enjoyed the show online. I wonder how much of the online viewers were Filipinos. And that's
I'm sure a lot.
Tonight's broadcast. I know, a whole lot. Thank you for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news or the week is just starting. So
Yes.
see you back tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. As I always say, I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This program is supported by SMC Global Power,